In this video, I will show you the Excel Insert tab and ribbon in depth. Let's get started. Now, this video is just one in a series that will take a look at each of the Excel tabs and the corresponding ribbons. So I hope you'll watch all of the videos in the series. But let's focus now on the Insert tab and ribbon. You can see that I have open a spreadsheet on workplace safety. There's information about different accidents and things that have happened in this fictional warehouse or company. And in Excel, regardless of what spreadsheet or data that you're working with, you have a list of options of things that you can insert into the spreadsheet to enhance the data. Let's take a look. So I'm going to go here to the Insert tab, and of course the ribbon reflects that I'm on the Insert tab. If I go to the Draw tab, the ribbon changes. But for now, I want to be on the Insert tab. And we're going to focus first on the Tables group. The first item that we can insert into our spreadsheet is a pivot table. And as you can see, you can just click the top part of the pivot table button to add in a generic pivot table. If you prefer, you can click the lower part of the button and then choose a specific kind of pivot table. But I'm just going to click on the top part of the button, and I get a pop-up that's going to help me to set up my pivot table. Now, what is a pivot table? Basically, I think of a pivot table as a tool for helping me to understand or better digest the data in a spreadsheet. This spreadsheet has all sorts of information, but a pivot table can help me focus in on the specific information that's relevant to me right now. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that I've selected a table or range. And it looks like right now, the entire spreadsheet is set up to be the data for this pivot table. If I click here, though, I could select a different range of data, okay, something like that. And then I could click here to go back. But I do prefer having the entire spreadsheet be the range for this pivot table. Next, I need to decide, where do I want the pivot table to be placed? Do I want it to be placed somewhere on this existing worksheet or spreadsheet? If so, I can select the exact part of the spreadsheet where I want it to appear. I'm going to tap Escape because I don't really want that. Instead, I want Excel to create a new worksheet that will become part of this overall workbook. And on that worksheet, it's going to place this safety data pivot table that we're going to create. So I'll click New Worksheet, click OK. And you can see here, I have a new tab. It's called Sheet 1 in this case. And there's some information here where it says Pivot Table 1. And then over here on the right, a panel has opened up. And this panel is kind of like a wizard. It's going to help me to set up this pivot table. So how does this work? And what should I do next? If there is a specific field that you're interested in, okay, remember a pivot table helps us focus in on the specific data or information and draw out insights or key information from the overall spreadsheet data. So let's say I'm interested in knowing injury locations. So of all the injuries that happened at this fictional workplace, what part of the body was injured? Also, I'm interested in the gender of the person that was injured. I could add in the age group. I'm going to take that one off in this case. I'm interested in the incident type, and maybe I'm interested in the number of days lost. And how about incident cost? So as I'm checking these boxes, the pivot table here at the left is changing. It's automatically adjusting to show the information that I'm interested in. And all of this information comes from this safety data spreadsheet. It's just that it's all spread out and it's kind of hard to understand exactly how that information relates to what I want to learn. Now, from time to time, you'll add something into your pivot table and it won't help. So for example, year. If I add year, this isn't very helpful. We have a sum of all of the years associated with these accidents. So at least this part is not very helpful. This part may be, but that's why you can uncheck items that you decide you don't really need to know all of this data. If you needed all of this data, you could just use the spreadsheet that has all of the data on it. So I'm going to go back to my sheet 1 with my pivot table, and you'll notice that there are some other options here below. We also have some settings here in the upper right, and you can adjust some of these settings. For now, I'm going to close the pivot table fields panel by clicking the X, and I'm going to go back to the safety data spreadsheet. If you want to learn more about pivot tables, please watch my other videos on pivot tables in Excel. You'll learn them inside and out. Let's move on now to the second type of table that we can insert into our Excel spreadsheets, and that's a recommended pivot table. I also have a separate video on recommended pivot tables that I'd love for you to watch. But what this does is instead of giving us checkboxes of all of the different types of information that I have available, it just recommends information. So this is Excel trying to be intelligent and trying to figure out what I might be interested in. Here's a pivot table that's a sum of all the days lost by injury. That really could be important data. What about this? Sum of days lost by age. That could be very important. If you click on one of the recommended pivot tables, you get a little preview of what it is. So I can just look at this and see that it looks like the ages 25 to 34, people in that age group have lost the most number of days. Now there's lots of possible reasons why. Maybe there's just more employees in that age group, but this information really could be very key and important for me. If I browse down, there are other options as well. And if you decide that none of these match what you're looking for, you can switch to a blank pivot table and build it from scratch. I'm going to go with this second option here, click OK, and now I have a new sheet or worksheet, and on that sheet I have the pivot table that was recommended to me by Excel. Now, even though this was a recommended pivot table, I still do have options here at the right, so I can still make adjustments and have those applied to my pivot table. Okay, let's go back up here to the Insert tab and look in the Tables group. Let's look at the third option we have there, which is simply a table. It's not a recommended pivot table or a regular pivot table. It's just a table. And to use this button, typically I like to first click and drag to highlight a range. So with that range selected, I click on Table. Notice it asks where's the data for your table. And because I clicked and dragged to select a range, it already knows that that's what I'm interested in. My table has headers. Well, it doesn't quite yet, but it will. So I put a check mark there, click OK, and there's my table. Now, very often when you're inserting a table, you've already got some data in your spreadsheet. So I could put in name, address, phone, put in some data here, some information, and now I click and drag to highlight the range, click on Insert Table. My table has headers, click OK, and now that's set up as a table. There are all sorts of benefits of using tables, and once again, I do have other videos that focus on tables, so please check those out. Okay, I'm going to switch back to my safety data spreadsheet, and next we're going to move on to the next group on the ribbon, and that is the Illustrations group. And if I click on that button, it opens up with some other options. Because my computer screen is small, these don't naturally fit on the ribbon, and so that's why I have to click Illustrations for those to show up. Okay, first we're going to look at the Pictures option. So I'll click on Pictures, and I can insert a picture from this computer. That's one of the options, so I can click there. I'm going to go to this People folder, and I'll double click on an image, and then I can resize that image. So this is an image from my computer, and I can bring it in to my spreadsheet. Now that's just one option of many. If I click back here on Insert Illustrations, I can also insert, instead of pictures from this device, I can insert from stock images. If I click there, it opens up a search area, and I can do a search. I'm going to search for first aid. And I like this first image that comes up, so I'll click on it to select it, click Insert, and it's downloading this image from the stock images collection. Now I can resize that image by grabbing the corner of the image, and I could put that next to the words first aid. If I don't want that white background to be there, I can just select the image and go up to a new tab that appeared called the Picture Format tab. That appears once you insert and then select a picture. And here at the left, I'm going to click on Remove Background, and it worked very well. So I can resize that. It's not going to affect the other data in my spreadsheet. So we've looked at Insert Illustrations, Pictures, this device, stock images. And your access to stock images may depend on whether you have Microsoft 365 or not. If you don't, that's okay. You should have online pictures, and so you can search the internet for pictures that have Creative Commons licenses. I'm going to search for Band-Aid, and I'll just click on that one, click Insert, and once again, I can select the image on the Picture Format tab. I can remove the background if I want to. I'll just check Keep Changes, and then I can resize this down just by using any one of the corners surrounding the image. Okay, back to the Insert tab and Illustrations group. We've looked at each of these three options for pictures. Let's look now at shapes. So I can click on shapes to easily insert a freeform scribble if I want to. I can basically just draw on the spreadsheet any way that I want to. I can then change the color of the drawing if I want, and there's all of these other shape format options that I have. But typically, when I'm using the Illustrations Shapes tool, I'm usually not drawing it out myself. I just want a star, and I click and drag to draw out that star. Now, a little trick, if you hold the Shift key on the keyboard, it will draw out the star with perfect proportionality. Going back to Insert, let's go back to Shapes. Notice all of these other shapes that we have: ovals, rectangles, we've got text boxes. We have arrows, which can be very useful. We also have equation shapes, flowchart shapes, callouts, just lots of wonderful shapes and useful shapes. In many cases, you can then click on the shape to type. Okay, so that's the Insert Illustrations Shapes option. We also have Illustrations Icons. If you click on Icons, you can do a search for an image, but the results will be icons only. I'm going to go with this one here, click Insert, and now I can move that icon to the appropriate spot, use the corner to resize it down, and it's good to go. I'm going to click away from my illustration and go back to Insert Illustrations, and let's move right along, this time to 3D Models. If you click on the top part of the 3D Models button, it will take you to Microsoft's stock 3D models. If you prefer, though, you could click the bottom part of the button and choose a 3D model that's already on your device. Maybe you have another 3D tool that produces 3D models. Adobe has some really cool, pretty user-friendly tools for creating 3D models. So in that case, if you've got one of those, you would just click this device and insert that 3D model. But in my case, I don't have one of those handy, so I'll click on Stock 3D Models, and it brings up several different categories of 3D models. And I can search as well. So I'm going to type in health, and there's lots of different options. I've got a tooth here with its roots. I've got a rib cage. I'm going to go with this safety symbol here. Click Insert, and a 3D model is getting inserted into my spreadsheet. There it is. Now that it's in the spreadsheet, I can click on it and drag it to rotate it. And just like with the other images, I can use the corner to resize it down and then place it where I want it to be. All right, we're moving right along. Back in Illustrations, you'll notice that it is possible to insert smart art. These are things like flowcharts, matrices, pyramids, things like that. Just select the one you want, click OK, and then those smart art layouts are then editable. You can either click here where it says text or here at the left. This is often easier to do the edits here. So you type in what you want at the top, in the middle, and at the bottom. My spreadsheet's getting kind of cluttered, so I'm going to hold Control and tap Z a few times just to get back to a little bit more of an organized spreadsheet. Okay, the last option I want to point out in Illustrations is screenshots. Please watch my video tutorials on inserting screenshots and screen clippings. But the idea here is that I can take a screenshot of windows on my computer, even if they're not the window that's currently open at the front. So I could do a screenshot here of this image. It's about Camtasia. And then I could use that screenshot in my Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to delete that, but that's a very handy tool. Please watch my other videos on that topic. Okay, so that's the Illustrations group. Next, we're going to tackle the Charts group. And don't worry, it's not as bad or as hard as you might imagine. And I'm just going to click anywhere in my data and then go up here to the Insert tab in the Charts group. I'm going to click on Recommended Charts. If you click this button, it's similar to the recommended pivot tables button. This will give Excel the opportunity to try to guess the charts that you might be interested in regarding this data. So I'm going to click there, and let's see what Excel comes up with. Here we have a clustered column chart that is the sum of days lost by injury location. So lots of back injuries, lots of abdomen injuries, and some not applicable injuries. That's interesting. Not very many hands injuries. Okay, so that's a very interesting chart. Excel also thinks I might be interested in this one. Incident cost by incident type. Sum of days lost by the plant. Sum of incident cost by report type. So lots of different options that I can choose from here. If I like a particular one, I can just click on it, click OK, and that recommended chart has now been added to one of my sheets. I'll jump back to my safety data spreadsheet, back to Insert. What if you don't want a recommended chart? Sometimes you know exactly the kind of chart you want. In that case, you may want to skip recommended charts and go directly to the chart type that you want. So maybe I want a line chart, and I would like it to be a 3D line chart. So I select that, and it's a mess. Now the reason for that is Excel used all of the data in this spreadsheet that it could find. It just put it into that chart. So let's do one that's going to make a little bit more sense. It's going to be a little bit more under control. And so this time I'm going to click and drag on age group, and I'll drag down through January 7th, and I'll get incident type and days lost. With those selected, I'm going to go to Insert, Line Chart, 3D Line Chart. And you can see that it produces a chart based on the data that I had selected. Now, it is possible to select data that's not all clumped together. So for example, I can hold the Control key and click and drag to select this data as well, and then go to Insert. And this time I could do a different kind of chart if I wanted to. But the idea is you're not limited just to selecting areas of the spreadsheet that are together with each other. The recommended charts, those are the easiest. Excel kind of does the work for you. But if you know exactly the kind of chart you want, you might want to select your data and then go find the specific type of chart that you want to display it with. Next, notice that it is possible to insert filled map charts. Now, you have to have the right kind of data for this. It needs to be geographical data, and it may have to have some numbers associated with it, but that's something that you should definitely try. Okay, one more kind of chart that you can insert, and that's a pivot chart. I'm going to click here on the top part of the pivot chart button, and it takes me to a dialog box that looks very similar to the pivot table dialog box that I got earlier. And that's okay. I'm just going to add this to a new worksheet. I'll click OK. And very similar to the pivot table, I can select the data that I'm interested in, and a pivot table is created along with a pivot chart. I also get a new tab on the ribbon, the Pivot Chart Analyze tab, and that only appears if you are selecting the pivot chart, but that gives you some additional options to go along with it. Okay, back to my Safety Data tab. Let's go back to the Insert tab. We finished the charts group, and if you want to learn more about charts, watch my other tutorials on Excel charts. But next, let me just draw your attention to the option that we have here to insert a tour and specifically a 3D map. This is an option that I want to explore in a different video. If you're interested, watch for that video on 3D maps. There's some interesting options that we can use here to create a video, to capture the screen, and to put some of these elements into our spreadsheets. For now, I'm just going to X out of that, but just know that that is an option that we have. Okay, next, let's look at the Sparklines Group. Sparklines are a very interesting kind of chart. They're basically mini charts that reside within cells. And to show you this, I'm going to insert some empty columns here in the middle of my data. Let's say that the number of days lost changes over time. Okay, so maybe this is first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, etc. And some of these numbers change as time goes by. What I can do is I can go over here to column I and click on cell I2. And with that selected, I'm going to put in a Sparklines line chart. So I click on line. Now it wants to know the data range. Well, the data starts here in this cell and goes to this cell. Where do I want the Sparklines to be placed? In I2. So that's already selected. I click OK, and a sparkline is created representing the trend of these numbers over the first 3 quarters. I could then click and drag to apply the same type of sparkline all the way down my data, and you can see that it calculates the trend of each of these rows of data. So that's the idea behind sparklines. In addition to line sparklines, you can do column sparklines. I'll click OK. There's the column sparklines. And you can also do win or loss sparklines. If you want to learn more about sparklines, watch my other videos on that topic. Next, let's move to the filters group on the insert ribbon. And you can see we have options for slicers and timelines. So I'm going to start by clicking slicer. This enables me to insert a slicer, which brings out certain key data that I want to look at. So how about gender, incident type, and incident cost? Click OK, and I get the data that I selected sliced up, and I get these lists with buttons, and I can move those out of the way a little bit if I need to. But the idea here is that I can easily say, all right, I'm interested in seeing information about cuts that happen to male employees, and maybe the cost was $60, or maybe the cost was $0. And so again, it's a way to hone in and focus in on very specific data. I'm going to clear that filter, clear that filter, clear that filter. And in fact, I can now click on one of my slicer lists and tap delete, click on another one, delete, and the third, delete. So that's slicers. Again, they're basically a type of filter. There's also an option for timeline filters, but that requires connections to other data. So I'm going to skip that in this video. But let's move on and look at the links group on the insert ribbon. The way the link tool works is you select a cell or a range of cells and then go up to the link button. And if you click the top part of that button, it opens up a dialog box that you can use to turn the contents of that cell into a hyperlink. So for example, I could put in wikipedia.org, click OK. That's now a hyperlink. If people click on it, it opens up the internet. For example, I could put in http://www.wikipedia.org, click OK. So that's the official web address for Wikipedia. And now this is a hyperlink. If people click on the word painting, it opens up the web browser for the computer and takes you to Wikipedia. So that's a nice option to be able to create hyperlinks to web pages. But you're not limited just to that option. Notice that you can link to a place in this document. So the word fabrication, I could link it to sheet number 2. Maybe there are charts on sheet 2 or pivot tables that bring out information about fabrication. This hyperlink would be very helpful to send people to sheet number 2 just by clicking. I'm going to jump back to safety data. Let's look at other link options that we have. It is possible to link to an email address. So if you put in someone's email address here, you could even put in a subject, and then when people click the hyperlink, it will open up their email program and a message will be created to be sent to that email address with the specific subject line that you set up. Okay, that's the top part of the link button. If you go to the bottom part of the link button, you can link to recent documents that you've opened, spreadsheets, Word documents, etc. You can also go down here and choose Insert Link, etc. And you can browse down to see more. Okay, next up, we have the comments group. In Excel, if you collaborate on spreadsheets with other people, it may be very important that you put in comments from time to time. So I'm going to select this cell and choose comment, and I get a pop-up, and here I can type in a comment. Okay, there's my comment. I click post comment, and now anyone that sees this spreadsheet will notice that there's a little purple icon in the corner of that cell, and when they put their mouse on it, they see my comment and they can reply to it. It's very helpful when collaborating with other people on a spreadsheet. Okay, next we have text. We can click on Insert Text to add a text box that you can click and drag to draw onto the screen, and then just type in the text box. Click away from the text box and it's entered. You can move that text box. It just floats on top of your data. So that's a great option to have. In addition to that, we can insert text headers and footers. Notice that you can't use the page layout view, which is required for putting in headers and footers, if you have freeze panes turned on, which I do. That's okay. I'll just click OK. It turned off freeze panes and it'll be all right. So here I can change the header and I can also change the footer. Okay, I'm going to go back to the Insert tab and let's move on to the last group that we're going to look at, and that is symbols. I can insert equations. There's different options for that. Here we have the area of a circle, binomial theorem, and of course we have Taylor expansion. We've got to have that. And you can just click to add those equations into your spreadsheet. Whenever you use the Insert Equations tool, notice that you get an equation tab and it brings up all sorts of characters and symbols that you can easily add to the equations and you can use them. So especially for math teachers, engineers, etc., this insert symbols equation is really a cool and very useful option. Next to that, we have symbol, and this will bring up all sorts of different symbols, some that are typical, some that are not so typical. You can even change the subset that's shown, and then you find the symbol that you need, click on it, click insert, and it's entered into your spreadsheet. And it doesn't have to be from within an equation. Okay, so I just clicked away into another cell and I inserted this strange symbol right into the cell. Doesn't have to be part of an equation. Okay, so that was a quick run through of the Insert tab and ribbon. You may have noticed I spent a lot more time showing the table options, the illustrations options, and even the chart options than some of these other tools. One reason for that is they are more commonly used. But these other tools also can be very helpful, very useful. And I hope that you'll go to my channel homepage and do searches for each of these topics, especially the ones that you're most interested in. In most cases, I have another video or 2 or 3 on each of these topics. But I hope you enjoyed focusing in on all of the options on the Insert tab and ribbon. And remember, this is just one of a series of videos. Please watch my video on the Home tab and ribbon. And eventually, I'll also have a video on each of the other tabs and ribbons. In the meantime, thank you for watching. I hope you found this video to be helpful. If you did, please like, follow, and subscribe. And when you do, click the bell and you'll be notified when I post another video. If you'd like to support my channel, you can do that by clicking the thanks button below the video, or you could support me through my Patreon account or by buying channel merch, and you'll see information about those options in the description below the video.